Welcome to another Desi and Lee real estate show. Here it goes. You're on.
Good morning, Napa Valley. Lee and Desi real estate show coming to you live from the studios in Napa, California, 1440 AM. I am Lee Miller.
I'm Desi Capaz.
And if you didn't know it, we are realtors. We live, eat, sleep, and breathe real estate, and you can add to that euphemism. We also talk about it. We live, eat, sleep, and breathe and talk about real estate on this show. And this show is sponsored by People's Home Equity. They're dedicated to the simple goal of helping Americans achieve the dream of home ownership. And it's also sponsored by our friend Tom McDonald at Signet Reverse Mortgage. And Tom, we will be hearing from in the second half of our show.
Well, you can always contact Tom also at 707-265-6385, Signet Reverse Mortgage, taking people from where they are to where they want to be.
There you go. So this was a great weekend. We always like to just kick the show off with our weekend activities.
Yes.
And for the first time ever, I did the Light the Night ceremony in the Oxbow Commons. If you're not familiar with that, it's a little walk around downtown, and when you light the light, you are lighting either a gold light for someone who has passed from cancer, or a red light for somebody that
is going through it,
and then a white light. And so we had the white light because my granddaughter, Elliot, is 4 years past her treatment, and so she's almost cancer-free. She was diagnosed with a cancerous brain tumor before her second birthday. So we did that, and a lot of good folks out there raising money to help fight cancer. Mm-hmm. And then the family did the Aloha Festival.
That's always fun.
Yeah, lots of good food and a good family fun over there. So.
That's fun. The ukulele.
The ukulele. That's what I learned. Yeah,
the ukulele.
It's not a ukulele.
Well, us Americans, we always put a spin on something.
We always mispronounce things, like the Sierras. They are not the Sierras. That's another one of my little pet peeves.
Oh yeah,
it is the Sierra Nevada range. It is not the Sierras. Sierra in Spanish is already plural, but you probably knew that.
Yeah, I knew that.
My Cuban brother, Desi.
Well, this is the same person that will correct you on saying realtor.
Because I don't say docator, I say realtor, not realtor.
It is two syllables. You're right.
Yes. What'd you do this weekend, Desi?
Well, it's considering it was beautiful weather out there.
Yes.
I just enjoyed the city of Napa. I was out in the community. I was out in the parks and just enjoying it with my family. That's what I did.
Good.
We don't have weather like this that you can take advantage of, and it's certainly not going to happen soon because we're getting close to fall and winter. So you better take advantage of it.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, we don't have humidity, and we don't, So
no.
We're spoiled.
We can, yes, we can consider ourselves blessed because, there's a lot of Floridians out there with no AC because there's no power, and, they're going through a lot right now. So, yeah, that you could say we're blessed on. But let's also remind the listeners how to contact us for any suggestions, questions. Please just let us know what you want to hear. If you have a question about real estate, or if you have a question about, city politics and what's going on, and if you need to know how to find out about, just the latest, council meeting, just get in touch with us. www.leeanddesi.com is one way. Also, you can email us at leeanddesi@gmail.com. Twitter, we have a Twitter handle at Lee and Desi. And then also, me and Lee, we put on a monthly show on cable, Comcast Cable 28. and you can also find us on Uverse. It's on channel 99. And it is a monthly show that we put on. As a matter of fact, the taping of October's show is going to be tomorrow for us. And it's all about the community. It's talking with community leaders and nonprofit activists and
political, business, and nonprofit, except tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to shake things up a little bit,
right?
But it's still going to be local. But we're having Surfin' James.
There we go.
And Wendy DeWitt, the queen of Boogie Woogie, in the studio.
Well, you know what's funny is that we've been doing the show for quite some time now, and we always try to keep it, community focused. But I think this is our first fun show that we're just kind of letting loosening the tie a little bit and just having fun. So I think we owe it.
So that will begin airing October 1.
Right.
So
and it's every Monday and every Saturday. Mondays is at 4 p.m. and Saturdays it's at 7:30 p.m. So they're easy times to look at. But if not, you can go on YouTube and look up All Things Napa. That is the TV show. That is the name of our show. It's All Things Napa.
So let's talk about some of the we talked about what we did. So there's some events coming up that we definitely want our listeners to know about.
Right.
One of them is the Pathway Home Golf Tournament. Mm-hmm. I'm the co-chair for that tournament, and it's a week from today. And you don't want to miss that if you're a golfer, if you care about veterans, if you've got a heart for veterans like Desi and I do, reach out to us and see if you can get involved in that tournament. There still might be a couple of golfer spots available. If not, you can always come to the program at 4 o'clock and see what the Pathway Home, hear what the Pathway Home is doing for our veterans on a local basis. We'd love to have you out there. And then we also want to make sure everybody knows about the big Realtor dinner dance on October 14th.
That's right.
That's not just for realtors. It's for the entire community. And talk about a great event. All you can eat, all you can drink. Yes, I said all you can drink. All you can drink responsibly. But it's only $100, and there's going to be music and great fun, and it's just we're going to just have a party. And by the way, it's going to raise money for some Norbar selected charities. So keep that on your calendar, October 14th. We should probably put that on the website as well.
And it will be on the website. It's going to be it's the first annual too, so those are always fun to be a part of, and we look forward to it. So that's October 14th. It'll be on the website. So coming up soon is Martine. He's going to be calling us for the latest mortgage basically rates and see what the rates are doing. We know that they had lowered some a little bit, but we're going to find out what they did this past week.
And it's good that we have a little bit of time before Martine calls in, Martine from the People's Home Equity, because we want to update our listeners. We talked about H.R. 2874, the 21st Century Flood Reform Act, and we encouraged everybody to reach out to your representative, governmental representative, and tell them not to let this expire. And kudos to all of you. It worked. They listened, and they have decided to postpone making any decision on that at least until December 8th. So that's a good thing. So,
well, there is a couple other little things too. Let me throw this number out to you. I'm just going to throw this number out. 121,861. What do you think that number is?
People were still without power?
No. Jeez. It'd be a lot more than that. No, that was the number of realtors, okay, who took action on that issue of flood insurance.
121,000?
861.
All right.
So that was the number that went after Congress, told them, please do extend this, reform it. We need something to be done here, and that's what Congress did. At least at this moment in time, they extended it to December 8th. So
and that's good. And if you're not familiar, this is something that provides improvements, increased funding for mitigation of floods. It caps the overall premium increases, improves the claim and mapping processes, and removes the hurdles for more private market participation, because competition is good. So we want that competition. And if those 122,000 realtors did not voice their opinion, and Joe Citizen also did as well, then perhaps that would have expired, and that would be a very bad thing.
And realtors are for the people. They're here. We're here for the consumer, and we want to make sure we protect all the consumer laws and protect what is ours as far as real estate is concerned. So it's in their best interest. It's in our best interest, should I say. Also, I do want to make mention that usually on Tuesday nights you have a city council meeting, talk about all the issues in town, and they're going to talk about water rates. I can't speak today. Water rates increases. Okay, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about increasing some of those water rates in the city. So, just want to make sure if you have anything to say about it, make sure you attend the meeting.
Have they indicated the reason why? Because it makes me wonder if their revenue is down because they've hammered into all of us to conserve water.
Right.
And so we use less water. They generate less revenue, so now they need to increase.
And that's exactly
and if
it.
There's,
the revenues are down.
The drought, I suppose, is officially over, but that doesn't mean that we want to just start wasting water. But, boy, that's going to be interesting. I would really like to know why they feel a need to increase the rates.
Well, you answered your question. You pretty much did. The revenues are down. It's a business, and they're now looking for ways. So who usually suffers from that is going to be us. We're going to be getting the increases. And so if you have anything to say against it or for it, I suggest that you attend that meeting tomorrow for the council. Mm-hmm. Well, usually Martine is on time, but it's 11:16, and we don't see the flashing light.
We should let our listeners know that we have Rick Tooker in studio today. Rick is the Community Development Director, so he knows for the county of Napa. I guess if I don't say that, he's the Community Development Director. That could be for anything, but no, it's for the whole county of Napa. So he knows of every little development project, every large development project that is been applied for, is in the works, is being held back, needs more information or what have you. So that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, that's
hearing
going to come
Rick
up.
Tooker talk.
That's going to come up in the next 5 minutes. But first, let's go on to Martine. So, Martine, how are you today?
Good morning, John.
How's everything?
Going?
Good. How's everything going?
Oh, it's awesome.
Well,
Monday.
Yeah, it is Monday. and we want to make sure our listeners know how are the rates doing, and have you seen any, anything change in the last week?
Yeah, the bonds are weak this morning, and the Dow was up 75 points. So when the bonds are weak, that means that people are not investing on a 10-year bond,
right?
And they're investing in the stock market, which makes rates go up a little bit. But I think it should get better. I know that there's really no news for this week, but next week the Feds are going to meet and they're going to discuss if they're going to raise the prime rate. But it looks like it's going to go unchanged. And just so everyone knows what the prime rate is, the prime rate, it's short-term rates, so it's going to be credit cards, equity lines. It's not long-term rates as your mortgage. But, again, the 10-year bond's not doing so well right now. But,
yeah, it's at like 2.2, right? 2.2%, I think.
That's correct.
Yeah. It's not doing so hot. But for the most part, we don't know why the stocks are actually still going up after all this political unrest out in the world. It's amazing, but still people are still investing.
I know there's a lot of uncertainty going on in the market right now. The thing that was really big is the Equifax with the credit. They got pretty much hijacked, where I think it was 143 million users.
Yeah, Bridget talked about that last week on the show.
Yeah, and I'm talking with a lot of my clients. You can actually freeze your credit. So in order for any companies to pull your credit, they have to contact you, and then you have to unfreeze it. And then that way no one's able to, freeze your credit, and it doesn't hurt your credit score.
Right.
So there's a lot of confusion out there. If you freeze your credit,
make sure you make that clear, because I've seen and heard talk about this about doing a credit freeze, and some people saying not doing it, don't do it. And so, what is the right direction?
I would highly recommend, I'm advising my clients that I would freeze it, because a lot of people think that it's the credit card information that got hijacked, but it's not. It's your personal information, your social security number, your date of birth, where you live, the address, employment information. So it's a lot of data, and in order to really protect yourself, I would highly recommend freezing it. It doesn't hurt your credit score, but a lot of consumers are confused and think that their credit information was stolen, like credit cards. So there's, some consumers are like, hey, I'll just get my credit card replaced. No, that's not the data that was taken. It's your personal data. So, they can, use your social securities for employment. They can use it for fraud to open up different credit lines. So I think the best way until this gets all ironed out is to put a credit freeze.
Well, you heard it right here from our resident expert, Martin Yatako from People's Home Equity. Don't take a chance. Freeze your credit right now. It won't hurt your credit score. And it was not just credit card numbers that were stolen. It was Social Security, date of birth, address, all the information that the bad guys can use to steal your identity. Thanks for joining us, Martine. People's Home Equity, dedicated to the simple goal of helping Americans achieve the dream of responsible home ownership. You can reach Martine directly at 707-766-0699, extension 1. And now we welcome Rick.
Yes,
welcome
we do.
Rick Tooker.
Rick Tooker, he's the Community Development Director of the City of Napa, and we have him in studio. We're going to talk about some developments, and some approved and some not ready to be approved, some developments. So how you doing, Rick? There's the mic right there. You can go ahead and use it. Go ahead.
Good morning.
And we just, before you start, Rick, we're doing Facebook Live, and unfortunately Facebook Live does not pick up our phone calls. So, unfortunately, that was probably a long period of silence and only hearing Desi's and my end of that conversation. But our listeners on KVON 1440 definitely pick up on that. And you are listening to the Lee and Desi Real Estate Show. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you for having me, John.
There you go.
Right close to the microphone.
All right.
There you go. All right. Desi's getting his notes. There's just so much that we want to cover, and we don't even know where to start. So,
yeah. Well, let's start in the city. We have some developments. Let's talk about a little bit about affordable housing and what needs to be done in the city. We know that there's,
and we can even start with, should we call it affordable housing? Should we call it low-income housing? Should we call it workforce housing? I like workforce housing because it has no stigma associated to it. As affordable housing, and certainly low income does, but that's just me.
That's a good point, because people call it different things. What's becoming more and more common these days is the phrase housing that is affordable to all people.
Right.
So that means sometimes housing that's at the high end, and it means housing that's at the lower income end. Mm-hmm. But all the terms, whether it's market force, affordable, they all work. What we do know for certain, though, is we have a housing crisis. We have a housing crisis that's occurring at the state level,
yes,
regional level, and in Napa. We're no exception here. And it's getting harder and harder to afford housing. It's harder and harder as a parent, myself as a parent with 2 kids, to know whether or not they're going to be able to live in Napa after their college career goals have been achieved. So it's something that's important. But the city council, who I work for through the city manager, has identified affordable housing or housing that is affordable to all people as the single most important issue that's occurring here in Napa.
It is amazing where you find you go out to the citizens and ask them what is the number one issue, and it is housing right now. It's amazing to hear that, and the state is trying to do what they can to make this all better. I hear that they're going to try to insert $20 billion into the state to try to build more affordable homes, but we're only talking about, I guess, a total of around 70,000 homes. Is that enough? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's something that we're certainly not going to be able to build our way out of, regardless of how much money comes from the state to help or what we can do locally. But I know what we're doing is certainly more than most people know. And that's a difficult challenge. Sometimes it's just getting information out there. I mean, a perfect example of what the city's been doing, and I know this dates back to 2000 is kind of a fact to our progress over time, but 2000 is a good marker because that was pre-recession. And then 2008, of course, when the economy went south, we've seen a period of time that's grown where permits were slow. But if you look back at 2000, the city of Napa has put on the street about 100 to 102 new affordable units every year. So that's on average over the last 16 years. And that's pretty significant. Those are units that are affordable to housing or to households in need. So those tend to be at the lower, very low income level. So that's maybe a family who's earning 50 to 60% of the average income that a Napan earns. So those are salaries that are somewhere in the range of about $50,000 to $65,000. So 102 is not bad. That's something that
every year for 16 years to boot. So
right, and you have slow periods and you have larger periods, but we're certainly getting a lot of product out there on the street just this year alone. We've approved 3 projects, or in the process of approving 3 projects that'll put about 120, 130 units of affordable housing on the streets as well. So you've heard about them over on the Gasser property on Soskell. One's called Stoddard West, and that's 50 units of affordable housing. Manzanita, which is a property that the city owns, where the confluence of Old Soskell and New Soskell come together behind Nob Hill, the Silverado Shopping Center there. Another 50 units of housing there. And there are a couple other projects that are going on, too. And so that's just in the period of last, 8 or 9 months that those planning entitlements have been approved. They still have to be built, but we're well along our way for just 16, 17 alone.
Good. And what's the nature of those properties? Are they all single-family, or are they a mix of condo, apartments, single-family?
Well, they're apartments, which is
they all are.
And that's a big need right now. The single-family, at least detached units, there was a program prior to about 2012 that the city had in place called inclusionary zoning. And when a subdivision, say, of 20 or 30 or 40 units was built, 10% of those properties had to be set aside for affordable housing. Well, you can see you don't get a lot of bang for your buck if you're doing 10%. So instead, we've really transitioned more to the for-rent product or even the self-help product. We partnered with Habitat for Humanity on a property recently that was an unimproved public right-of-way. We were doing some road work, and we either acquired some property or we had some surplus property, and we converted that over to a nonprofit builder who in turn has built affordable units on that property. So we're getting very, very creative with the approaches we take.
Well, and that's what, the state is trying to find out is solutions because, again, throwing money at it and trying to build your way out, like you said, that's going to be difficult because we're not there yet. And but one of their solutions in some talk here is to add to real estate transactions, trying to get a little bit of money out of real estate transactions. Well, honestly, that's counterproductive, really, because, we're trying to help the consumer in these type of transactions save money and not have to put too much more money out there. Another solution would be possibly lowering costs to development, these permits and even, materials, things like that to lower the cost there. Well, that's difficult to do in itself. But what are we trying to find as a city to try to
Be creative.
be
and
more
come up with
creative?
Well, the costs are one that definitely is something that's worth consideration, and it's always difficult as someone who works for a municipal agency to talk about permit costs because they're always high. But the city, what I feel comfortable about, and I've worked for other, I guess, 5 agencies in my career in land use planning and community development, our fees are among the lowest third, so 3 different tiers of development fees associated with housing in the state, and we're among the lowest. Now, these costs still will seem substantial, but when you consider the cost of water hookup, sewer hookup, which city is not the sewer provider, it's Napa Sanitation. But when you look at all those fees, school district fees, they can get in the tens of thousands. A fee of about $40,000 per single family residence, which we know is passed on to the ultimate buyer, is about where our costs are. I left a community, Livermore, back in about 2000. I guess it was about 2000, actually 2001. Those fees were among the highest in the state back then, which were $110,000 per single family. So they
Just
were
for the
highest,
permits. Wow.
Just for the permits. Now, keep in mind those fees, at least a portion of them that doesn't go to utilities like water or sewer or school district, but those fees that go to affordable housing actually get aggregated with other fees, and that's what makes projects get built. So, the Gasser property is a perfect example. The Gasser, what they call the West Stoddard, or Stoddard West, I should say, project. That was something that the city was provided the land that we brokered a deal with a nonprofit to then take a long-term lease on that. But monies that we aggregated from other resources of upwards of $1 million were then pumped into that project to make it work. And what makes it also helpful is, in order to get tax credits or other resources, if you have city money into those projects, then you can actually qualify for quite well for those.
Right.
So I'm trying to think, maybe in the last 3 or so years, the city has taken in several $1 million in fees. And those are getting, like I say, turned around and pumped into affordable housing projects.
We're talking to Rick Tooker, Community Development Director of Napa.
Now, Desi, I think there's also it's worth a conversation about kind of the newer things that are going on. So second units or granny houses.
Well, and that's what I was just going to touch on. Yeah, there has been some
ADU.
Right, ADU and junior dwelling units that have been the talk, and I guess the city has lightened that,
That made it
permits
easier.
and making it easier to permit those type of units.
And wasn't it the city was going to do it, and then Jerry Brown did it in addition, or it was something like that?
Well, and it's funny because it is complicated. The city actually had an ordinance that was approved last year, and that ordinance was quite flexible. It allowed for relaxing setbacks so that somebody could convert a structure at the back of their property. Let's say it was a pool house. If they wanted to put a kitchen in it and make it an independent dwelling unit, we used to call them granny housing, subordinate units, second units. Well, we did that back last summer. And then Governor Brown had signed legislation that actually did it better than us. So we went out and changed our ordinance again and made it even more relaxed than the state's model. But it has challenges, and there's never a great answer. As an example, people can convert structures. They can even convert their garages in some cases to dwelling units, accessory dwelling units, and allow for the parking outside. That can frustrate some. Neighbors will get frustrated sometimes because it feels like there's increased parking. But there's no right or wrong answer. It's not that black and white. So sometimes we live in gray, and if we're going to solve this problem, we're going to have to do it with some kind of middle ground in order to get the community to really react to it.
Yeah, that's definitely. We do have to find a common ground to some of these solutions, because I could see that being a problem of, I can see the rooftop. I could, or there's windows being placed on the other yard looking into my yard, things like that nature, and I'm sure that comes up in talk. Okay, so we are talking with Rick Tooker, the Community Development Director of the City of Napa. We will be right back. Only 30 seconds here on the show, the Lee and Desi Real Estate Show. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Lee and Desi Real Estate Show. I'm Lee Miller.
I'm Desi Capaz.
And we've been talking with Rick Tooker, the Community Development, I can't remember his title, Director, City of Napa. And at this time of the show, we always do This Day in History. And guess what? I have actually 2 This Day in Histories that are kind of real estate related.
Okay,
They're
that's
building
good.
related.
Wow.
Because
I like
on
that.
this day in history, in 1793, the father of our country, George Washington, laid the cornerstone to the United States Capitol building, home of the legislative branch of American government. And that building, we think things are slow now. That building eventually took nearly a century to complete. So things really, really fly compared to what they were back then. But I think it was less bureaucratic tape and inferior construction techniques, but also the British set fire to it.
Right.
And it was called into use during the Civil War. So there just a lot of delays that kept going on.
And that was the White House, are you talking about? Or
No.
the Capitol.
The Capitol building. Yeah.
Capitol building,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then also on this day in history, in 1981, another real estate related, Canada's West Edmonton Mall made the Guinness Book of World Records for having 20,000 parking places. Now, talk about a difference in our time. This was pre-Amazon, pre-internet, so they wanted to build a mall that had 20,000 parking places and 5.2 million square feet, or 48 city blocks. That is a big, big mall. So those are your real estate related this days in history for the Lee and Desi Real Estate Show. And you can always reach out to us at Lee and Desi or leeanddesi.com or leeanddesi@gmail.com. And now we welcome Tom McDonald of Signet Mortgage. How are you, Tom?
Excellent. Good morning, Lee. Desi?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
So what pearls of wisdom do you have for us today about reverse mortgage?
Some interesting stuff. If your listeners recall, a couple, 3 weeks ago, I talked about now or later. Should you do it now, later? Some reasons. One was government regulation could change things, and it turned out the very next day, the Tuesday, they did. They changed what they call the principal limit factors. Think of that as loan to value by about 20%. So today we're trying to talk something similar. Should you spend your savings down before you do a reverse mortgage?
I don't think so.
Good. Here's the issue. Some people, let's call it maybe 10% of the population, can live on the income alone from their savings and IRAs and investments. But most people can't. They're having to draw from the principal to support their lifestyle. But think of it this way. If you've got cash, or a CD is also cash, you're relying on some interest from that. Lately it's been next to nothing, but in the past it's been 6%, which could be quite worthwhile. But as you spend down and use up that CD, it's no longer kicking off the interest. So now your income has gone down, and you need more from the principal than you did before. Same thing with bonds or bond mutual funds, which may be paying a decent interest rate nowadays. But again, as you use up the bonds, the interest that you were drawing starts going away. Mm-hmm. Stocks, mutual funds, many of them kick off dividends, and same downward spiral. You need more and more money. And if you draw from stocks, part of what you're hoping for with stocks in the mix of stocks, bonds, and cash is a growth factor to help you keep up with inflation. But if you have a downturn and you're having to still draw from stocks, now you sold some stock and your principal has gone down at the same time, and you can't recover once you've sold the stock. So if the stock goes back up, but you had to sell it because you needed the cash to live on, now you're hurting.
So what's the solution?
Well, one more item, real quick. If you have IRAs, some people, once they're over 70 and a half, they have to draw. But if you draw from an IRA, that's taxable.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. And, of course, it may be invested in cash, stocks, and bonds. Reverse mortgage allows you to space that out. So if the market is down when you need some cash, instead of selling that stock, you can take some money out of the reverse mortgage, and then later on when the market's up and you feel comfortable selling a stock, you can pay yourself back into the reverse mortgage. So that line of credit option can go up and down, and you get to reuse it. And so that can help you last much longer in life, and your portfolio may not outlive you where otherwise it could very easily. In fact, there's some studies, and we'll go into that in another show. But
well, I have a question, and I don't, maybe a curveball to you. I don't know, but I don't think so. Tom knows a lot.
That doesn't happen too often.
Exactly. So during one of our meetings with our broker, somebody decided to take out, I guess, a reverse mortgage on their home to pay as a down payment, or as a down payment for another home.
Okay, for a second home, sure.
For a second
okay,
home.
That's done sometimes.
Is that done? That's what I wanted to ask you. Have you seen that?
Yeah, you could use the reverse mortgage for any purpose.
Right.
Doing it as a down payment and not actually paying for the whole house means that you're adding the obligation of a mortgage, which, as you get older, can get a little scary, especially if you're wanting to retire at some point. And so somebody has to be over 62 to have done their reverse. So it kind of depends on their whole situation, but I've seen that done, and it's not a bad thing. It's
right.
just every situation is different, as we talked about. And so we'd want to make sure that person understood the pros and cons.
Well, wouldn't, depending on the interest rate that you get on the reverse mortgage side and putting it into a higher interest rate, wouldn't that not be a good move?
Oh, as compared to buying a second home and
right.
doing a regular mortgage.
Right.
Yeah, it could be very good.
Yeah, so you
could be very good, yeah.
Right. So you have to look
Yeah,
at it.
so that's the economics of it.
Right.
A lot of times, as you guys know, people don't quite always understand all the costs of home ownership. And so, there could be condo fees, there could be, property taxes,
Sure.
homeowners insurance. So someone would want to make sure they've analyzed that.
Yeah.
But the reverse mortgage
right.
is just a piece of that. It's not the reverse, it's that they're buying a second home.
Right.
And then how do they handle the finances?
And that's all I'm trying. I'm trying to make that to our listeners, to let them know that there is a possibility that if you're looking for a stream of money to buy a second home, I mean, maybe in their stage of life they don't want to, but maybe they do. Maybe they're into buying pieces to rent.
Maybe they're thinking of a place they're going to retire later on.
Exactly.
And it gives them a chance to kind of get sorted out, organized. And
That's a way to do it.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Great.
Well, the good news is Tom knows all the answers, and I can personally vouch for his integrity and his honesty because I had him look into it for a client of mine, and he said, Lee, it's really not the best thing for them, and there's just no better endorsement than that. So reach out to Tom, and you can reach Tom directly at
707-265-6385, or you can go and email him at tom@reversemortgageconsultant.com. It's Signet Reverse Mortgage, taking people from where they are to where they want to be. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you coming by.
Thanks a lot. And you can tell them I won't be here for the next 4 weeks.
Okay. yeah.
We're definitely going to miss you, Tom.
Tom's going on vacation.
Lucky
right.
him.
And now we're going to continue our discussion with Rick Tooker.
Yeah.
Boy, I had a question about the ADUs that we were talking about. So let's pick up that conversation. I can't answer that question because that'd really be putting you on the spot. So, have you seen a lot of increase in applications for ADUs, and just since that change was announced, really just the last couple of months, correct?
Yeah, we absolutely have. Before the state adopted its ordinance back in November, we had already seen that bump just by virtue of the work that we did in the summer. And to put perspective on it, between about 2000, 2015, we had 85 second units approved. Now, not all of those were built, but we approved them. In just the last year and a half, with all this discussion, city and state, we've had about 30 applications.
Wow.
So we can see that it really has sparked an interest. And it's not just ADUs, which are the accessory usually detached from a principal house,
Right.
but they're this junior
Yep.
accessory units. And what that is essentially maybe your kids have gone off to school, maybe they're married and gone, and you don't want to, you're empty nesters, but you really don't want to sell your house and move to something smaller, more manageable. Well, you can actually carve a piece of that property out, your family room, your laundry room, your bathroom, carve that out for a rental.
Right.
And that's what we call a junior accessory dwelling unit. And the fees to that are almost non-existent.
Right. I was
except
just
for
going to say
construction.
that's very low. Right.
Very, very low and easy to do. We're seeing seniors do that.
Mm-hmm.
We also have home sharing programs where we try to match people up. But this is a way to get sometimes a couple, certainly younger, as you know, our service industry is increasing in town, and so that tends to be younger folks who are just starting out. They tend to like those kind of units. So junior accessory dwellings are great. We also have a city program. We're just starting to create a waiting list for it. But we're partnering with a group out of Marin County. I believe they're called Lily Pad, and I'll have more information about this probably in the next month. But we're starting to take folks in who are interested in that program, where Lily Pad will provide design services, contract management services, and the city can provide some financing for the construction to have low interest or no interest payments over time if they dedicate a JADU to an affordable housing or somebody who needs low cost housing.
No, that's great.
That's wonderful. That's especially for the hospitality industry. I think that would fit in perfectly. I know I have a client that I'm talking with right now, and where she wants to create some income from her property when she, to find something out there to do that. And I told her, well, one of the options you may have is doing a JDU where, you can block off a section of the home, have a different entrance, and, you can create a place and income that way, because I know that the industry, a lot of the wineries out there, $15 to $17 to $18 an hour is only going to get you maybe $800 a month. I'm just guessing at the top of my head, but something to that nature will help that type of worker. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. These are good programs, and they're showing the diversity, the range of things that people can look at. So for people who need that, we can provide contact information for you, or just go to the City of Napa's website. But getting on the waiting list will help, because we could receive quite a number, and we only have so many folks to be able to process them. So the sooner you can get in the program, the better.
All right, let's shift our conversation to some of the development projects that, if you go to the county website and see projects that are under development, it's a lot. The last time I looked, I think there were 71, and I think at least half of those were wineries. Not surprising. But yet there's a lot of other development projects, and of course we want to talk about housing. There was the recent article about the Napa Pipe project.
Sure.
What can you tell us without, that wasn't in the newspaper that you can tell us about that project?
Well, Napa Pipe is an interesting project, because from the newspaper it talked about the 10-year history of developing a relationship not only between developer and county, but ultimately adding the city layer in that too. Certainly they're well on their way to cleaning the property, to getting the infrastructure in place. But this is a project that, in order for it to succeed, they're going to have to build in phases that make sense. And everybody talks about the Costco. And of course, the Costco is on the right side, if you will, of the railroad tracks closest to where people can access them from the 221 corridor, the Sosco corridor, down Kaiser Road. So in order to get that project moving fast, in my recollection, the article said 2019, and I recall one that before said 2018 and 17. They have to get they have to get the infrastructure in place, and they have to sell something in order to pay for that infrastructure. So we're working on an application with the Napa Redevelopment Partners, and that's the city at this point in time. We We have about half of the jurisdiction, half remains in the county. But we're working with them to revise those plans. You'll remember reading 700 to 945 housing units. Well, they were all going to be on the other side of the railroad tracks from the Costco. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense if you're trying to sell the housing on the other side of the railroad tracks where the cost is significant. So they're going to bring some of those homes over and put them on the Costco side. So we're just beginning that dialogue now. If they can get, of that 945, if they can get maybe 200 or 300 of those units on the Costco side, you can see where it starts to recover those costs, and we can start seeing return on investment and actually permits being pulled. If that doesn't happen, it makes the Costco more tenuous.
Well, it sounds like I've been here since 2008 in the city, and it's just been that long of talk. We're all wondering when it's going to happen. But for the most part, we have. I guess it just seems like the developer and the city have to work together there and kind of make this happen.
And the relationship's strong too. It's funny sometimes the discussion goes about the difficulty between developer and municipal agency, or maybe it's county to city, which is largely untrue. And in this particular case, I think all the partners are working together. This really just comes down to getting the capital in place and the return on investment. And we're not the ones, whether it's county or city, who are shelling out the funds to make that development work. But we keep our fingers crossed. We're positive. The article said 2019. Let's hope it's 2019. But you'll see a lot in the newspaper as in the next 12 months we'll be working really closely together to change that project so it becomes perhaps more viable. But there are other projects, too, in the meantime that are bringing a lot of housing.
Well, and there is. And do you find that there, with all the other developments going on, because there are, is there more land to be developed here in Napa? And are we seeing any other areas that we can possibly just take a look at and say, that's something in the future we can move on?
Well, there are. And, of course, because we're surrounded by this gorgeous ag land, or green belt, as some people call it, it gets more challenging to find those sites. And as well as we get closer to build out, and we're still far from that, but as you start getting into the 70 or 80% of build out, your choices get a little bit more slim on what you can do. And often the hardest sites have already been, or left over because the best sites have been developed. But one of the projects that I know I'm really thrilled about and looking forward to is Tulaque Village. Again, another Gasser project, right? But Tulaque Village was a property that BLT, a developer, was in partnership with Gasser. Well, they got entitled about maybe 15, 18 months ago. Well, they flipped the property, as residential developers often do, to Fairfield Homes. Well, Fairfield Homes is now ready to submit their application for about 300 new units on that property along that corridor as well, that Sasko corridor. So that's a project that's going to bring apartments, definitely workforce housing by virtue of their size and scale, some family housing as well. You'll see larger units. But that's a project that we think will be under construction by the fall of 2018 once they get their building permits. So that'll be exciting. When you start counting the units I mentioned earlier with Manzanita, there's another project that's on Redwood called the Redwood Duets that's bringing 30 to 40 affordable housing units. Just last year alone, we approved about 700 units. And that scares people sometimes, growth. But you have to keep in mind, we didn't do a lot between 2008 and 2015 either.
Right. Yeah. Nobody was doing much in the way of real estate. Just for our listeners, describe where Tulaque Village is.
So Tulaque is along the strip of Saskell. So as you're traveling, say, southbound from downtown, it's on the right side. A lot of people see a lot of construction activity, road work being done out there. It's where the auto row was across from Toyota. The Gasser office building is there. So it's back in that particular area up along the Napa River.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how the decade ends here, because it seems like a lot of projects will be ready to go, hopefully, and that's what we need as far. So I'm wondering to see how prices, if they stabilize, when we put more and more out on the market.
Oh,
these
if we
new
increase our
developments.
inventory?
Yeah, especially like something like a big project like a Napa Pipe or something that's bringing so many homes. What does the price do there? Do they stabilize? Kind of thing like that. So, these are questions on the horizon that we're going to, take a look at when I say the decade ends. I'm sure a lot of these projects are, like you said, Rick, is going to about 2019, 20 is when we're going to start seeing them develop. So.
Yeah.
Be interesting.
On the apartment side, just really quickly, I think what our hope is, and you're the experts in the real estate world, the developers are the experts in the building world, but if we can get more apartments out there, we think we can help regulate the cost, because people will want to move up to those. You're going to get new surfaces.
Sure.
That'll free up the mid-range units that are
That's
20
exactly
and 30
right.
years old. And those might come down in rent, or at least stabilize and not go up as quickly. So we hope that there's a little effect that'll getting more apartments on the street is going to help reduce costs a little bit.
Definitely for the rent side, I will say that. I mean, it's again, I run across dozens of people that always say how it's just really hard for them to pay for that rising rent, and it continues to rise, which is
And of course, it's going to rise when you have. At one point, not too long ago, our vacancy rate for rentals was 1.2%. That's against a healthy vacancy rate of about 5 or 6%. Right. So, yeah, when you're a landlord and there's less than 2% vacancy, pretty much dictate whatever you want.
There's no doubt about it. So it's we just hope that we can somewhat get these developments ready, going, and what do you see as far as timetable is concerned, Rick, on some of these developments?
Well, what typically happens is the winter season, the rainy season, hits us about mid-October in the construction arena. So projects that aren't under construction by then will wait until the spring, about April. So I suspect there aren't going to be a significant number, now that we're into September, of new projects that are under construction. But next spring to next fall, I think it's going to be a very active period. And we're among friends here talking about the real estate world and the development world, which is, a good thing, like I say, in order to improve costs and to grow in a planned way. These kinds of projects have to happen. But that doesn't go without notice that, of course, we have traffic issues that we have to resolve. The number 2 significant problem outside of housing that we still have to address. So we're looking carefully at these things. It's a balance. There's no perfect answer. But I think next year, come spring, we're going to see a pretty active period of time in town.
Well, I know traffic is affected by the way, a lot of these rents are being, when they rise, people look elsewhere. So that's why you got the 29 just being stuffed daily, I think, for the most part. So we'll look forward to those time. I did have a question in mind. I'm trying to pull it out of my head, but I can't remember right now.
I don't even know if we have time.
Well, we don't really have any more time. We're getting up close to the top of the hour here, Rick.
This was very informative. I'm sure our listeners really appreciate it almost as much as Desi and I do that you came in. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it, Rick, for taking the time out to come out and talk to. Yeah, thank you.
That's what's great about our community is that people like Rick are accessible. They'll share what they have, and it's pretty transparent. And you don't get that in a big city. So we're very appreciative. So.
Well, Napa's a very giving community, so that's no surprise.
Yep,
everyone's wonderful here. Well, thank you, Rick. We'll be in touch, and if anybody does have questions, we can always take your questions through email or Twitter, and that's at Lee and Desi. Or www.leeanddesi.com. It's really simple. I didn't make it very hard, right? Lee and Desi, LeeAeddDesi. See, I think we should do a jingle. I'm telling you.
Ding.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Lee and Desi Real Estate Show. But for this edition, we are done, and I want to thank all of our guests today, Rick Tooker, the Community Development Director, and Tom McDonald from Sept Signet Reverse Mortgage, and of course Martina Taco from People's Equity. So we are going to be coming to you next Monday at 11 a.m. same time here at 1440 a.m. And thank you, Lee, for coming in too.
Hi.
You can say something if you like.
Good night, Desi.
Good night. All right. We will see you next week on the Lee and Desi Real Estate Show.